Gracias a todos. Thank you for being here. We're really excited for this afternoon. We have an amazing panel for you, and we're going to learn a lot together. We're going to share some of our cultura, and most importantly, we're going to celebrate and honor our students. We're very excited about that. As we get started, I want to remind everyone, if you have questions, comments, you can utilize the Q&A, and one of our colegas board members, Michelle Batista, will be responding to your questions and ensuring that we embed some of those in our webinar at the end. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you once again for joining colegas for Elevating Nuestra Cultura, our 2021 webinar series. My name is Dr. Cynthia Olivo, and I am the president of Colegas. I just wanted to remind everyone that Colegas was created during a time when the national political landscape was really portraying the Latino, Latina, and Latinx community in a negative way. We were being portrayed as criminals. Folks were scapegoating us as people who do not contribute positively to our nation. And so a lot of us came together to organize. And these sentiments were very familiar, especially for those of us who grew up as Chicana, Chicano, and Chicanx activists. And we're very aware of the historical exclusionary practices that have occurred and that somehow still have a stronghold on our society today. So colegas create space for community college practitioners and our allies and supporters to do everything possible to ensure that we eradicate racism and bias in all forms and eliminate equity gaps while preserving our culture and centering the needs of our students. I'm very proud to be a granddaughter of migrant farm workers, the daughter of an incredible single mom. I'm third generation born in this country, first to go to college due to these exclusionary historical practices that occurred. And so I'm proud to serve as the president, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this amazing webinar today. This is Dr. Guadalupe Corona, and she's one of our board members and founders. Lupe?
Thank you, Dr. Olivo. We will begin today with our land acknowledgement. We begin this presentation by acknowledging our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of Indigenous people throughout the state of California. We pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and our relations past, present, and emerging of the lands from where we all gathered today. We thank the UCLA American Indian Studies Center for providing this land acknowledgement model, and we encourage everyone joining us to continue to learn about the traditional land caretakers where your college is located and work to be in good relation with them. Aho.
Thank you, Dr. Corona. Our next presenter, to me, embodies resistant cultural capital. She is courageous and brave, and we're so happy to have Julissa Arce, who provides her testimonio in her book, My Underground American Dream. Her life is a testimony that undocumented students can be successful, that they too can achieve the American dream. Julissa Arce is a political commentator, speaker, writer, and nationally best-selling author of My Underground American Dream and Someone Like Me. She's also working on a forthcoming book, Rejecting Assimilation. She was named one of People in Español's 25 Most Powerful Women in 2017 and 18, and Women of the Year by the City of Los Angeles. She is a leading voice in the fight for social justice, immigrant rights, and educational equality. She's a contributor for Cricket Media, CNBC, and host for Cricket Conversations podcast. Her first book is currently being developed as a television series with producer and actor America Ferrera. Julissa immigrated to the United States from Mexico at the age of 11 and was undocumented for almost 15 years. Some of them spent rising to prominence on Wall Street. In order to help other young people in similar circumstances, Julissa co-founded the Ascend Educational Fund. AEF is a college scholarship and mentorship program for immigrant students in New York City, regardless of their ethnicity, national origin, or immigration status. She serves on the board of directors of the National Immigration Law Center. She was officially sworn in as an American citizen in August of 2014. She lives in LA with her husband and their two cats, Nico and Pancho. I follow Julissa Arce on Instagram and Twitter and just am amazed at her work. Especially last year, she was on the Oprah Book Club show speaking up against the author of a book that was really just, exploiting our culture. And I just want to say thank you so much to Julissa for always being courageous. And Dr. Corona will be interviewing Julissa. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon.
Hi,
How are you today? Welcome,
and
colegas.
thank you. I've been learning so much from the previous two presenters.
Julissa, you have an amazing story. And for those of us who work closely with our undocumented students, we're always looking for voices of inspiration. You have a journey that many undocumented students are living. Given what you accomplished, is there anything you would have done different?
Hmm. In terms, you mean just like um, anything that I would have done different in life or in the,
Your journey.
yeah, that, oh, okay, that's a really, okay, let me think. It's a big question. Um, I think that I was having this conversation last night with some friends about undocumented people and how for so many people what sort of keeps us going is having a goal, right? And having sort of a dream and having this sort of thing that we know we're going to achieve or this thing that we want to attain. And for undocumented people, so many times that thing that we want to attain isn't something that's actually attainable to us. Like when I was in high school, this is back in 2000, in the 2000s. I graduated high school in 2001, and back then, there were no laws that allowed undocumented students to go to college or pay in-state tuition. Texas was the first state, even before California, that allowed undocumented students to go to college and pay in-state tuition. And yet, somehow when I was in high school, I was still sort of operating under, I was operating as though going to college was going to be something that I could attain, right? And so I sort of had to, I say this in my book, that I had to live in this alternate reality where my immigration status didn't matter. And I had to really suppress that part of my experience, because otherwise, I think to me, I don't know that I would have still studied so hard in school or still no le hubiera puesto tanto esfuerzo, because I would have thought college was not something that I could actually achieve. And yesterday was the graduation ceremony for the scholarship fund recipients. So the scholarship fund that was mentioned in the intro, yesterday we had our graduation celebration for our 2021 students. We had 8 students graduating, and one of the students was sharing how um, he didn't think that he was going to go to college, but he still loved learning. And he said, I loved learning, and so I just kept learning, but I never thought that I could go to college. And he's graduated from NYU. He just graduated from NYU, and I just think it's so incredible how, knowing that the doors are closed, we still go through all the steps to get to that door. And so when you're asking about what I would have done different, I don't, I'm sure there are like a lot of lessons. And so if we're talking about lessons I learned and those sort of things, I might have a different answer. But just in terms of like, what would I do different? I don't know that I could have done anything different. I feel like I did the best that I could with the circumstances that I was in. And I would argue that so many undocumented people do so much more than their circumstances allow them for. And whatever those are, I mean, even I think going to work at a restaurant or taking care of someone's kid or gardening someone's front lawn, like all of those things are still things that we're doing, above our circumstances, because our circumstances tell us we shouldn't even be in this country. And yet here we are, and yet here we are still doing.
Mhm. And I want to add, because I think you mentioned is you wouldn't have changed anything. However, there's something about the resilience in our heritage and what makes us strong. The question I have for you is, for many of us, our heritage, our culture, and roots are a big part of our resilience. What are you most proud of being of Mexican descent?
Yeah. So I am Mexican. I don't say of Mexican descent because I am actually Mexican. So I like to just say, Mexican. I was born in Mexico, and I don't think you have to be born in Mexico to be Mexican. Um, because I do really sort of subscribe to this idea that Mexico is something we hold in our hearts, and something that we um, it's an idea more than it is a place or a country, in my opinion. um, and one of the things that I know Dr. Olivo mentioned my next book, which we changed the title. So the name of the book is You Sound Like a White Girl, The Case for Rejecting Assimilation. And we just changed that, so you wouldn't have known. But we changed the title, and the reason I bring up this next book is because a big part of writing this book was researching the history of my people in this country, because so often the question I had in my mind growing up was, where were we? Where were Mexicans when the civil rights movement was happening? And where were Mexicans when the United States was at war during World War II, and during World War II, and during Vietnam? And like, where were we when when all the scientific discoveries were happening? And so I always had this question: where were we? And unfortunately, I grew up in Texas, so it might be different in California in the education system. But in Texas, in school, K through 12 education, we don't ever learn about Mexicans, and more broadly Latinos, during the civil rights movement. It's as though we just didn't exist, right? There is no. I didn't learn, for example, about the walkouts in Crystal City, Texas, because only one of the four cheerleaders could be Mexican American, in a high school where 85% of the students were Mexican. I never learned about this women, and I actually just met them very recently. I had lunch with one of them, with one of the cheerleaders, who they're now in their almost 70s, and it's incredible to me how little I knew of that. And so when you ask me what's the thing that I'm most proud of, it's I've learned to be more and more and more and more proud the more I learn about what our people have been through and what they have overcome. And it is my hope that more people will learn will learn their own histories and their own stories, because there's so much there to be proud of. And when people tell us that we don't have a history, and that we don't have a claim to this country and to this land, they could not be more wrong. And it took me a really long time to learn that and to really know that. And it was only through learning our history that I feel now that nobody can take that from me.
Thank you. Um, Another question is, as an undocumented student in higher education, who impacted you the most in pursuing higher education? Who inspired you? What kept you on the path and the journey?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a couple of things. One, um, I mean, my parents, of course. My parents. My mom finished sixth grade. My dad finished high school as an adult. He went back and got a high school diploma as an adult, because same. He also had to drop out of school very very early on. And so my parents, even though they didn't have an education, they always instilled in me the importance of getting an education. And many times they would remind me that the reason we were in this country was so that I could get an education. So my parents, for sure. But there was also one high school teacher, and I will always remember Mr. Naspilius. He was my physics teacher, and he didn't know that I was undocumented, because I never shared that I was undocumented for a very long time. So he didn't know that I was undocumented, but I think maybe he figured that I was, just because of the things that I would say. And, I was a pretty straight A student in high school. I graduated at, top 5% of my high school class, and I didn't have any college plans. And so this whole time that I was, a National Honor Society and all of these things, and people would expect me to like be applying to all of these colleges and all these programs, and I wasn't, because I couldn't. Mr. Nesbilius always still really encouraged me to apply. And he said, apply anyways. The worst that happens is you get rejected. And if you're not applying, you already are rejecting yourself, he would say. So I ended up applying to the University of Texas at Austin, because he really pushed me to apply and apply. And I'm so glad that I did, because right after I graduated is when Texas passed the Texas Dream Act. And because I had already applied, the university was able to review my application retroactively.
Mm.
But if I hadn't applied, then I would have had to wait a year to apply the next year. And who knows what would have happened in that year of being out of school. And so I always remember Mr. Nesbilius, and I thank him so much because he encouraged me. And, the part that's really sad to me is that, I'm telling you a story of that happened 20 years ago. Like, I graduated high school 20 years ago, right? And 20 years later, still undocumented students feel like they can't go to college, that is still inaccessible. There are still educators and teachers and counselors that, if I'm being sort of optimistic, I think maybe they just don't know the laws. They don't know that undocumented students can, in fact, go to college in Texas, in California, and in many other states. If I'm being cynical, I think they purposely tell their students that they cannot go. So it's incredible to me that 20 years later, even access to the information is not readily accessible, and that undocumented students still have to go through the things that I went through 20 years ago. In other ways, it's gotten a lot better, of course, because now there are dream centers and students are able to say, I'm undocumented, I'm unafraid. They're able to express that about themselves in a way that I could never do 20 years ago. But in other ways, we still have so much work left to do.
Can you share a message to those of us who work and also students listening to you who didn't benefit from DACA and continue to be undocumented? What message do you have for them to continue to stay motivated and continue that journey, continue that path?
Yeah. I went to college at a time when DACA didn't exist. I mean, it wasn't even something that we um, imagined, and so um, I was like undocumented, like no kind of papers. And so I can understand sort of the additional fears that come from that. Not to say that having DACA, like that's, that it's the best, because there's still so many limitations with DACA, but certainly not having DACA makes things a lot more difficult. And the only thing I can really say and offer is to, the world already limits us enough. Like, the world outside already tries to keep us in quote unquote our place, right? And so for educators and for ourselves, we really have to push against that and to say, we're going to find a way, because that's the thing about immigrants, and especially I think undocumented immigrants. We go above, below, on the side, we jump, we crawl, whatever we need to do, we do to get to where we want to go. And so there are always different ways. I know one of the biggest sort of concerns is, well, I'm going to graduate from college, but I'm still not going to be able to get a job because I can't I can't get employment because I don't have a social, I don't have a green card, etc. um, but I would encourage people to check out an organization called Immigrants Rising. They do a lot of work to help students who just graduated from college set up LLCs, because you can actually get hired through your LLC to do contract work. And so there are imaginative, creative ways to still get employment, to still, you know, get paid, to still build a business, have a career. There is a way, and sometimes, you know, as we know, if you're undocumented, you know, you always have to work so much harder to get to those places. But definitely there is a way.
Thank you, Julissa. Your story is an inspiration to all of us who are working on the ground with all our students to continue to keep them inspired, to continue to move forward on the educational dreams and aspirations, and continue doing this amazing work that you create a space for us and the American scene, whether it's as an author or we look forward to your next chapter of the book and work that you continue to do. So thank you so much for our community. We appreciate every step of the way, every piece of work that you do to create a journey for our students in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Julissa. Thank you. And we were so fortunate to have Julissa Arce as our commencement speaker a few years ago at PCC, and I'm just thrilled to continue to see, you know, Julissa's journey and her career just flourish, right? And we'll all be able to see a television show about Julissa's life. So it's just amazing. Thank you so much for all your courage and your activism and your talent. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you. And don't believe everything you see on the show, because there's lots of things that are, you know, fictionalized for, it's going to be a great show. But if you really want the real story, definitely check out the book.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for letting us know that part.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Next, we have incredible practitioners. So, you know, taking the work of Dr. Yoso, Dr. Garcia, the activism of Julissa Arce, we're so pleased to present to you two faculty members who are going to demonstrate how we've been able to change their teaching practices, our counseling methods, as well as you know, just the way that we help our students at our colleges. So I am so proud to introduce to you Dr. Cristina Salazar Romo. And Dr. Salazar Romo is an ESL faculty member at PCC. And she is a faculty leader who completed her dissertation at USC Rossier College of Education. And she did her dissertation on remediating artifacts and creating a culture of inquiry in faculty. And if you all have adopted an equity-minded syllabus design as a tool, please thank Dr. Salazar Romo, because that is exactly what she focused on in creating a more inclusive environment by changing the way you present your syllabus. Cristina leads our FYE program, faculty, and curriculum, our Hispanic Serving Institution Grant Gateway course redesign. She was our new faculty seminar lead, and she began doing this additional work outside of teaching in the classroom by leading workshops to help PCC faculty change their syllabus. Cristina has taught and influenced the pedagogy and curriculum for literally hundreds of PCC faculty, and I'm very proud to present to you Dr. Cristina Salazar Romo.
Thank you so much, Dr. Olivo, and it's a privilege to do this work under your leadership. Hello, colegas. I'm so honored to be in this space with all of you to share the work that we're doing at Pasadena City College to operationalize equity-mindedness and culturally relevant practices to advance the success of Latina, Latino, Latinx, and Chicana, Chicano, Chicanx students. It's my privilege to do the challenging work of interrupting dominant frames of whiteness and resisting norms and beliefs that do not validate and affirm our Latina, Latino, Latinx, and Chicana, Chicano, Chicanx students. In an effort to address the obligation gap that exists with our first-year students and to better focus on the strengths our students bring with them to higher education, we adopted Dr. Yoso's Community Cultural Wealth Framework to include in our FYE curriculum. This framework has been instrumental in giving our students and our faculty the knowledge and language to focus on our students' various forms of capital, including, as Yoso just shared with us from her scholarship, familial, social, navigational, resistance, linguistic, cultural, and aspirational. We intentionally shifted the focus of our FYE instruction to encompass a race-conscious lens that validates what our students already know while honoring their cultural ways of being. We looked at the work of Dr. Gina Garcia in Becoming HSIs and her description of social justice curriculum. In her description, she urges that we, and this is a quote she just had on one of her slides, teach students how to resist and be activists, teach students about their histories as racial, cultural, indigenous, colonized people, and teach students about systems of oppression and give them the tools for disrupting these systems, amongst other descriptors that are on page 70 of her amazing text. Through these two critical frameworks, we were energized to offer an FYE curriculum like no other. Next slide, please. Here's a brief representation of the various modules offered in our FYE College One course. And before I begin, I have to acknowledge our curriculum team, Counselor Desiree Zuniga, who is here and speaking next, my hermana, English professor Juliana Sampson, and our amazing career counselors who came in with an amazing assist, Antonio Del Real and Armene Papazian. Our work is much better because of our collaboration. The first module celebrates our students' identities by asking them to think about those who have come before, their legacies, and those who have inhabited the sacred space of the San Gabriel Valley. They learned about the indigenous Quiche, Tongva, Gabrieleño, also known as Gabrieleño people, and connected that learning to Yoso's familial, aspirational, linguistic, and resistant forms of capital. Next slide, please. They were introduced to Jessica Salgado, author of our One Book, One College selection entitled Corazón. Salgado, a Salvadoran American poet from Echo Park, California, was a favorite of our students for her unapologetic spoken word persona. In fact, I was told that selecting a book of poetry wouldn't work for our FYE students, but that just goes to show how little folks know about our cultura. Our cultura was based on cuentos, dichos, song, and lyricism. In fact, when we brought Jessica Salgado into our virtual space for a keynote speaker series, we had over 200 students, faculty, and staff in the virtual space. It was quite an amazing evening. Next slide, please. In our second module, we moved the curriculum to focus on career, specifically students' skills and interests, which were then connected to career and educational aspirations. Students again connected the work with Yoso's social, navigational, and cultural capital. We gave them an assignment in which they created a My Skills Legacy diagram, which asked them to celebrate the skills of those in their familial or kin circle. It was important for us to focus on the skills, and we're so privileged to have around those who support us. Next slide, please. Lastly, we wanted to leave our students with tangible tools to assist them as they navigate higher education. While modules 1 and 2 celebrated our students' identities and legacies, we acknowledge that the world can be unkind and downright racist. So we included information on various forms of microaggressions, namely ethnic, racial, LGBTQIA+ microaggressions, and used a framework by Dr. J. Luke Wood and Dr. Frank Harris to teach students how to respond in the face of microaggressions. Students learned about Title IX and actions to take to address sexual assault and harassment, stalking, and consent. Throughout the whole course, students learned from scholars of color. They saw visual representations that mirrored them. They were engaged in work that affirmed their position and presence in higher education. A few quotations from our student assessments speak to the power of culturally responsive FYE curriculum. One student shared, "As a Native American, I loved learning about the Native communities that once stood where PCC is today. I love that College One strives to show diversity and to bring awareness to things that were swept under the rug for much too long. Another student said, I liked reading and discussing Corazón by Jessica Salgado. I appreciate that the professor introduced the class to a Latinx writer and poet. It was something new and interesting, and I very much enjoyed reading Salgado's poems. Another student said, I liked learning Yoso's cultural wealth, which is the community cultural wealth framework. It helped put a word to the experiences I felt in different spaces. These quotations show the impact of implementing culturally relevant and sustaining curriculum in an FYE program. Next slide, please. Because of the work in FYE curriculum redesign, I was then asked to lead our Title V Abriendo Caminos Gateway Course Redesign project, which strives to look at entry-level gateway courses, including math, English, and speech. In this project, our faculty members are engaged in a 2-year faculty inquiry group to examine, develop, and implement culturally relevant and responsive curriculum and pedagogies using FYE College 1 as an example. We have a faculty inquiry group framework that includes faculty learning in Yoso, community cultural wealth, and Garcia, servingness, amongst other notable scholars, one who was just present in the last Colegas webinar, Dr. Rendon's theory of validation. Ultimately, our goal is to strive for Dr. Garcia's liberatory outcomes. The work is ongoing and challenging, but if we can make significant change in these gateway courses, we will make a tremendous impact in Latina, Latino, Latinx, Chicana, Chicano, Chicanx student success. With that, I'm going to hand it off to my amazing colleague and hermana, Desiree Zuniga, to talk more about how she is operationalizing Dr. Garcia's liberatory outcomes. Des.
Thank you, Hermana, for the introduction, for sharing the incredible work that you have led to ensure that our students feel heard, validated, welcomed, and that their various forms of capital are recognized and celebrated. It is an honor to be on this panel and to share the work that we collectively do at Pasadena City College. As stated, I'm a faculty counselor and a faculty lead for the Abriendo Caminos HSI grant at Pasadena City College. PCC has 51% of students who are Latina, Latino, Latinx. These students are the reasons we have historically been able to secure Title V, Title III grants successfully. Therefore, the Abriendo Caminos grant team intentionally and unapologetically centers Latina, Latino, Latinx students and other marginalized populations in the work of guided pathways at PCC. When I joined the Abriendo Caminos team in 2019, I was welcomed by the grant lead at the time, Doctora Micaela Mares Tamayo, in a book. Next slide, please. The book was Becoming Hispanic Serving Institutions by Dr. Gina Garcia. This book has definitely inspired the work that we do and has sparked critical questions such as how do we move from being a Hispanic enrolling to a Hispanic serving institution? What do we do to center students' voices? And how can we foster an environment that is race conscious, identity affirming, and acknowledges the intersectional experiences of our Latino, Latina, Latinx students? How do we create spaces of liberation and justice? How do we dismantle the idea of HSIs being color neutral, funding that it maintains the status quo or excludes the recognition of social historical inequalities? And these are tough questions. And as we continue to interrogate these questions at the various tables with scholars, practitioners, student advocates, we quickly recognized that the experts that were missing at these tables were the primary experts, and those are our students. Next slide, please. That's where the creation of the student advisory equipo was developed. With the grant, we have included professional experts who are students who are paid through the grant and serve as experts, consultants that guide our work and amplify student voices. The student advisory equipo is intended to center our students' voices, ideas, perspectives, insights on activities, policies, proposals leading to the goals of the grant. Next slide. And these, let me show you my favorite colegas. So next slide, please. The student advisory equipo consists of 7 students and is growing. In fact, through the HSI grant, we have extended this opportunity to include Black and African American students. This has led to the creation of Black Lancer Collaborative Council, which is led by my amazing colega, Armia Walker. These 2 student advisory groups are actively involved in task force, working groups, committees that focus on the Guided Pathways Initiative on our campus. Next slide, please. As a faculty who gets to share many tables with these students, these tables and conversations definitely feel more inclusive and student-centered with them at the table. The formation of these student advisory has centered students' intersectional identities and voices. It is an example of servingness as defined by Gina Garcia. Having these students at the table has transformed our organizational structures of serving and has allowed us to move into non-academic liberatory outcomes for students. In addition to being at the table, our students have created culturally relevant programming and support students for services for students throughout the campus. The work we do is inspired by many of the scholars and social justice advocates who are here today, and in fact, those who are watching as well. Next slide. I want to highlight how the work we do is really inspired by, again, Gina Garcia. Our work is centered on focusing how we can provide servingness to our students as presented by Gina Garcia. Each month we offer, led by our students, 3 to 4 workshops facilitated by Latino, Latina, Latinx staff, faculty, and administrators so that the students can see themselves in our institution and have access to mentors. The student advisory equipo has supported the retention efforts of students on probation by reaching out to students over the telephone and connecting them with academic counselors or any other support services. They have assisted with the creation of student materials that help students understand the matriculation process. The student advisory equipo has helped with the Latinx, our very first Latinx resource guide, student resource guide that highlights services and faculty and staff throughout our campus that they can see themselves in. Overall, our students have created spaces where they are learning about themselves, their own history, and are building community. Next slide. Our training for student advisory equipo includes learning about the various forms of capital as presented by Terioso. We want to make sure that our students understand that they belong at these tables and that they have capital. Having students at these tables also challenges that deficit thinking that students cannot offer knowledge to support institutional change. It has been an honor to see how Yoso's work has inspired our students to build their capital and utilize these forms of capital towards making their own academic and personal goals happen. Next slide. These students are becoming leaders and they're moving from a critical conscious lens to a social agency practice. And we hope that sharing the work of the student advisory equipo inspires educators to see how you can apply the knowledge of these scholars and how you could stop, listen, and invite students to share their stories and voices and to see them as experts. I love how, I always call them my colegas, but my dear colega, Armia Walker, she always calls her students doctors. And I think that's brilliant because it really does help for our students to see themselves in these spaces and to know that they belong and that they are capable of so much more beyond PCC. So we are inspired by the scholars, practitioners, authors, and social justice advocates who are on this panel, but also those who are in tune today. May we never underestimate the capital that our students hold. And thank you so much for letting us share the work that we do at Pasadena City College.
And thank you, Desiree. Before you finish, I just wanted to say congratulations on being honored at PCC today for a huge award on living the mission, vision, and values of the entire institution. And congrats on finishing your first year of your doctoral program. Thank you for serving as our first year experience counseling lead and for leading the STEM Title III grant, where we explored community-based counseling. And just for everyone that's still with us today, for you to know that these two women have impacted the lives of 3,000 students in the fall with this curriculum and thousands of other students in the various other projects that they've been leading. And I just wanted to say thank you for helping us to create the best environment for our students. Great. And next we have Dr. Corona, who will introduce the incredible Dolores Huerta.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm as excited as many of our colleagues. I've had the pleasure of meeting Dolores Huerta, and a true inspiration for me as a mujer, and especially in the field of education. Dolores Clara Fernandez was born on April 10, 1930 in Dawson, a small mining town in the mountains of northern New Mexico. She's a co-founder of the United Farm Workers Association and is one of the most influential labor activists of the 20th century and leader of the Chicano civil rights movement. At 89, Dolores Huerta continues to work tirelessly developing leaders and advocating for the working poor, women, and children. As founder and president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation, she travels across the country engaging in campaigns and influencing legislation that supports equality and defends civil rights. Please help me welcome Dolores Huerta.
Okay. Gonna get me on?
Yes.
It's them. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
So wonderful to hear all of the wonderful things that all of you are doing to make the whole college experience so wonderful for students. And we know that the students that are attending the Pasadena College, the fact that they can get all of the support from all of you, I think will make their college experience so much worthwhile. And I do want to say to everybody, while you are going through all of this, I just do want to ask all of you with a call to action, because we also need your help in so many things that we are doing. Right now, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, we are working on a big project to get people vaccinated. That is, I am sure that with all of you, this is a top priority. Unfortunately, here in the Central Valley of California, where a lot of our farm workers and their families live, our vaccination rates are very low. And so we're trying to change that by, right now we have 100 people going door to door, making vaccination appointments for people. We're also setting up vaccine clinics where they can get the vaccines. We know a lot of our folks, they didn't have access to be able, they didn't have transportation to go to the clinics. And sometimes there's a lot of misinformation out there. So this is the work that we're doing. And I know that all of you are doing the same thing with all of your families to make sure that we can really stop this pandemic, because we know that unless all of us get vaccinated, the pandemic is going to continue. And we know that our Latino families have been hit especially hard by COVID-19. All of us have relatives and friends that have been affected, either that have gotten sick or that have passed away because of COVID. So we need to continue. And I know for the students, while you are so busy that you have to concentrate on the work and your schoolwork that you are responsible for, then we have to say we have to add other responsibilities to your daily work that you have to do. But I just want to say to all of you that I know that as Latinos that we are capable of. That's why they like, they like Latinos, because they were such hard workers. They always say the one thing about us that we are such hard workers. And so I'm going to be asking the students actually to also help us on a couple of issues. And I believe won't take a lot of time, maybe just, I'm going to say maybe 10 minutes out of your day. And we're working right now on a bill in Sacramento, here in California. It's AB 5, cinco, okay? AB 5, like Cinco de Mayo, it's easy to remember. AB 5, and this is by Dr. Joaquin Arambula, who is not only a medical doctor, but he's also an assemblyman from the Fresno, California area. And we're working on this bill because, as you know, we're talking about healthcare right now, but many of our undocumented population does not have healthcare. So we're working on a bill, healthcare for all. And we have a really good chance in Sacramento right now because there are additional funding that is coming from Washington, D.C. And we've had a good year here in California in terms of our budget. And this would cover people, undocumented people that do not have health care, to extend health care to them. And I know something that all of us know, somebody who's undocumented, and that this would be so important. So I would like all of you to please take a few minutes and send an email to Governor Newsom, to our governor, and say, please, can you extend healthcare for all to our undocumented people, okay? And it's AB 5, Assembly Bill number 5. Like it's Cinco de Mayo, it's easy to remember.
Gracias, gracias.
And then we have a couple of other bills that are very important. One, we know that all the work that we do, all of the marches and protests, that we can never be sure that what we want to happen will actually make its way into laws, into legislation. And as you know, right now, in many states like Texas, I'm sure a lot of us might know people from Texas, that they are trying to suppress the vote of the Latino community, of communities of color. And so there's a bill in the US Congress right now, S1. That's also easy to remember because it's the number one bill in this, and it's in the Senate, Senate Bill 1, and it's called For the People Act to protect our voting rights. And again, if you can take a few minutes to send them. Well, we know in California, we have our two great senators, Senator Dianne Feinstein and Senator Alex Padilla, the first Latino in the Senate, in the US Senate, by the way, from California. And to ask, but we have people that we know in Texas or Arizona or some of these other states, ask them to please contact their senators for Senate Bill number 1. And one more that I want to mention, and I am willing to bet that some of you did not know what I'm going to say, that we have right now also in the Senate, the Equal Rights Amendment for women. Now, I'm sure a lot of you thought, oh, we already have equal rights. But you know what? It's not a statute. It's not in the law. It is not in our Constitution of the United States of America. So we need to have that in our Constitution. And this is the time that we might be able to make that happen. So again, if you know people in other states, ask them please to say, support the Equal Rights Amendment, ERA for women, okay? And maybe we can make it happen. We can celebrate 2021 as being the year that women, we finally got equal rights to make it part of the Constitution of the United States of America. We are only one of the few countries, there's only a handful of countries that have not ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. And it's shamelessly, we might say that the United States is one of the few countries that has not. Okay, so we've got to make that happen. So, and I mention all of this because in all of the work that we do and everything that people are learning, what they are being educated for, is we will have to make democracy work in our United States of America. We have a crisis in our country right now. Our democracy is being challenged, and we are the ones that have to commit ourselves that we're going to be able to save our democracy, and it's going to take all of us, and especially for young people, because a lot of young people think, well, I marched and I did the protest, okay? But that's not going to be enough, because unless the issues that we want to really create a just and an equal society, unless we want that to happen, we have to get people to vote for progressive legislators so we can get these laws enacted, laws that can be implemented, that can be enforced, and that people can be held accountable. But I think we are living in a very special moment in our country right now. We can say that there is an awakening. We know that we, young people especially, are leading the way in terms of getting rid of the injustices that exist in our society. So we are part of this new justice movement in the United States of America. And we know what happens here extends to the rest of the world also. And so in this moment, in this blessed moment that we are living, we know that we can make a contribution, but also we also have to remember we can't do it by ourselves. We have to reach out to others. and make them understand that their voices are important. Their emails are important, okay, when they send them, their votes are important, and their presence is important. So I know that all the preparation that you're giving the students here, you're making them strong, and with the strength and the confidence that you're providing them, this is, of course, where our leadership is coming from. And they often say the young people are the leaders of the future. No, in today's world, we have to say, all of you young people are the leaders of the present.
Awesome. Eso. Thank you. And with
Welcome.
that, we do have three students, Enith, Natalie, and Diego. And they have some questions for you, Dolores. Thank you so much for that powerful message. And students, would you like to start with your first question?
Yeah, hi, Dolores. Thank you for being here. I am honored to share space with you, so muchas gracias. My first question for you would be, as a brown woman and mother, how do you navigate this patriarchal system that continues to discredit and oppress women of color?
Well, I have to say this is that, I'm sure a lot of us have heard that there's a saying in Spanish, and it says, "Hay que tirarlos a locos." Kind of when people say things that annoy you, or they discriminate against you, you know that they're the issue. They have a problem. You don't have a problem. So just pretend that they're not there. We have to have a little bit of Teflon. So whatever they say kind of, rolls off of our back and doesn't affect us. And I know that's not easy to do, but I can tell you a little story. One of my sons became a chef. And when he was in the culinary school, he called me. He says, "I'm going to quit. I want to quit the school because one of my teachers here is such a racist. He's always saying bad things about Latinos and Black folk." And I said to him, "Look, mijo, you're not going to marry this guy. Just learn as much as you can from him and ignore everything that he says." After he graduated, my son called me. He said, "Mom, that racist chef, I learned more from him than anybody else." Okay. And what I told my son says, "You're not going to marry this guy. Okay. Just learn what you can from him." So a lot of times we have to ignore them. And again, in the spirit of nonviolence, we kind of have to pray for them because we know that their racism comes from ignorance. And they are not as lucky as we are because they don't have the families that we had. They don't have the traditions or the knowledge that we have. So just kind of ignore them and hope that maybe later on down the line, they will get enlightened. And if there's anything that we can say to them, and sometimes what we might say to them to kind of pierce their ignorance, at the time that we do that, we might think that they're not paying attention. But what we can do is we can plant a seed in their brain and in their heart and hope that it will grow. But don't let it affect us. Don't take it personally. We just know, as I said before, they're the problem. We're not the problem. Oh, and by the way, one other thing too, in terms of your question, as women, oftentimes we think that we are the only ones that are responsible to take care of our families, to take care of our children. And we all often feel embarrassed to ask for help from other folks. But the only way that I could do what I did and was able to accomplish what I did is to be able to ask people for help. So never be embarrassed or feel that we have to know everything. Always reach out there because somebody will be out there that will help you, okay? And if the first person that you ask can't help you or won't, find somebody else and find somebody else and find somebody else. Somebody is out there that will support you.
Thank you so much. I'll hand over the mic to my colleague, Natalie, now.
Hello, it's really honored to be here with you guys. So my question is, what would your advice be to students who want to move from understanding social justice to social agency?
Well, once we understand social justice, as you said, that means that we have to do something about it, right? We can't just know about something and then not act on it because that would be a disservice to everybody that depends on us. And of course, when you're in school right now at the college, you are learning a lot. But if you don't act on that knowledge, you are doing a disservice to everybody that taught you and that supported you at the colleges. I mean, the worst thing that we can think about is having somebody that has a great education and then that they do the wrong thing or that they don't do anything. So think about this, that everyone that has been there to teach you, you owe them. You owe them to act on that knowledge. And we expect everyone, at least in my world, I expect everyone that has any kind of an education to act on that knowledge and to become an activist, because we need you. Right now, our democracy in the United States is in peril. We really are. And it's going to take every single one of us to act and to engage if we're going to stop the racism, the homophobia, the sexism, the misogyny, the ignorance in our society. So we have to be responsible citizens. And so that is why we have a huge responsibility, especially when we were fortunate enough to have a formal education, because we know so many people that were not as fortunate as we are, or as we have been.
Thank you. Diego?
Hello, hola. I'm here. I'm sorry. I am very, very honored to be sharing the space with everyone here. My question is, how can we honor and preserve the roots of Latino, Latina, Latinx culture, struggles, and accomplishments?
Well, we should also be very, very proud of our culture and the traditions that we've learned. And of course, sometimes we have to ditch some of those traditions, okay? Because they may not be so great. But so we may have to move on from some of our traditions. But it's wonderful to not only to feed upon our culture that we have, but to also share it with other people, because they may not, number one, understand it, or that maybe they haven't had the good fortune of being able to participate in some of our traditions that we have. Because again, we are, as we have been taught, that we also have to become teachers. So I don't know if that's exactly answering your question, but I always think that we can be so proud of who we are, because we have an advantage. When we come from a Latino tradition, we have so much richness in our culture that oftentimes other people don't, unfortunately, because their cultures have been kind of lost, you know, in the process of becoming Americanized, so to speak, or citizens of the United States. So I think we're very, very lucky that we do have a culture, that we do have tradition, and we should always be ready to share them and explain them to others.
Was there a time where someone discouraged you from doing the work you have done, and how did you respond?
Oh, not just one time, many, 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 many times. When I was in school, you know, and by the time I went to college, there was only a handful of us Latinos. I could really count them on one hand, because in high school, most of my friends it was such an unwelcoming environment that a lot of my friends even dropped out of high school. Or as we now know, the word is pushed out of high school, right? Because this is one of the things that our foundation, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, is fighting to stop the expulsion and suspension of our Latino and our Black students in our schools. We even sued our local high school district because they expelled 2,100 students in 1 year. 2,100 Black and brown students. And needless to say, we won that lawsuit. But here in the Central Valley of California, that is happening a lot. And throughout the United States, not just in California. So, you know, I was being one of the few Latinos in high school, was very definitely discriminated against. And so we had to fight through that. And you know, when I started organizing, I quit being a teacher to become an organizer. My family thought I had gone crazy to quit my teaching job, to go to Delano to organize farm workers for no money, you know. And so, and then again, even in the farm workers union itself, a lot of our male leadership always tried to undermine what I was doing. Luckily, I had Cesar support. Cesar Chavez always supported me, and his wife Helen, and Chavez always supported me. So as I mentioned before, when I spoke earlier, you just have to ignore all those people that are trying to put you down or get in your way or put obstacles in front of you, because you just have to know what your goal is. You got to keep your eye on the prize and just stay driven, because that's going to happen to us in life. And people will get in our way or try to discourage us from doing what we want to do. And just anticipate that that's going to happen and be ready for them. When I knew you were coming, you can say it in your mind to that person, and I know how to get around you, and I know you're not going to stop me in what I want to do.
Great. Natalie?
So my question is for Dolores. So how do you balance your activist work and your day-to-day life while also trying to de-stress?
Well, it's I am a very driven person, and sometimes I don't have a very good balance. I did say, I think earlier that, being a mother of 11 children and being an activist at the same time, I never could have been able to do that unless I was able to get so many people to help me with my children so that I could continue my activist work. But I think when we really want to accomplish something, we find ways and means to do it. To make it happen. And that's the main thing, I think, for all the students who want to say, just, stay true to yourself and true to your goals. And even if some people might think what you're doing isn't reasonable, as they did with me, you just have to have faith in yourself, and then also have faith in, because there will be people out there, like I said before, that will support you and help you on your way.
Great. Diego?
My question to Dolores is, how did you build community and get more people involved in your activism? And what can we do to move past performative activism?
What was the last part of the question? About
what can we do? What can we do to move past performative activism?
Transformative activism?
People who are just going through the motions of activism, but not really doing it out of corazón.
Well, I think to answer the second part of your question, I think anything that people can do, sometimes people are at different levels. I like to tell a story about one of my daughters, Juanita, who became a teacher, by the way. And when we were in New York City working on the Great Boycott, and she was on her plate telephone, and I said, "What are you doing, Juanita?" She says, "I'm calling the people." And I said, "What are you calling them for?" I'm calling them to come. And I asked her, "Are you calling them to come and do the picket line?" And she looked at me, she said, "They're not ready to picket. They're just going to pass leaflets." So sometimes we have people at different levels, and sometimes they don't have I'll call it the emotional fortitude to get out there in front, and maybe we just have them make phone calls or pass leaflets or do something that's at their level. And so then we kind of push them and pull them in to do a little bit more. So I think anybody that can help, if they can just do the phone calling, that's great. If they can help with the fundraising, that's great. Because people will develop in terms of their activism. But the more people that we can get involved, because we know that one person can't do it alone. We need everybody to be involved. And so I think we can be thankful for people, whatever level that they're helping in, that yeah, we need them. If all they can do is send those emails, okay, that's great. We need people to send emails. If they don't feel that they can go out there and march, well, maybe they're not ready to march. They're not ready to organize other people. So just keep them at, just be thankful for everybody that they can do whatever they can do. And they're happy to do it. And they can volunteer to do it, because that's what we need, a lot of volunteers.
It's incredible because one of the main people who fought for us, right, is Dolores Huerta. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to this incredible panel, to our students. Thank you for taking the time to see. Of course.
I want to add to Dr. Yoso's statement, and she mentioned earlier about being a scholar of ourselves, to study ourselves. And I don't know how many Latino students really know of the culture that we have, of our indigenous culture. The fact that Mexico City has always been, was, and still today is the largest city on the planet. Okay, right now. All of the, what our indigenous ancestors, the high levels of civilization that they had when people in Europe were living in caves, literally. I don't know how many people know that. So when they see us, we represent something we represent that highly developed culture and civilization. We represent not only our traditions, but what our people have fought for. And I don't know how many of you have seen, there's a PBS film called Foreigners in Our Own Land, or foreigners in their own land. If you haven't seen that PBS, documentary, try to see it because it tells you about how a third of the United States, which was Mexico, how that was taken. I thought I knew that history. I didn't know that history. And my family is from New Mexico, okay? So my grandfather, you know, he was alive when all that was going on. But I thought I knew it and I didn't know it. So we have to be scholars of our own culture. And what that happens, of course, it makes us stronger. It gives us a self-confidence. And one thing my mother told me, she said, always be who you are. You never have to pretend that you're anybody different. And so when I go to places, and I have been lucky to be with presidents and farm workers, okay? But I'm always the same person who I am. And I know that I represent something. And that is what we have to say to all of our Latino students out here. We represent something. We represent a great, great history of the people in Mexico that defeated the French, for instance, Napoleon's army. This is what we represent. And so we can be proud of that. And as we are proud, then we can have our colleagues or other people that we know. And many of them, we know they lose the Spanish language, unfortunately, because many people were punished when they spoke Spanish in school. So they lose that. And we should never put them down for that because it's not their fault. I mean, but I'll always just be proud of who we are and remember that we represent something. And we always have to say, remind the immigrants that came to the United States were from Europe. The immigrants that came to the United States were from Europe. Our indigenous people of North America and South America, we are the indigenous people of the two continents. And yes, this is our land. And no one should ever feel that they are not welcome or should not be here. Nosotros somos los primeros. We are the first ones, and we will be the last ones. And I'm going to share this with you. I think you'll like something that Cesar Chavez used to say when they talked about the land that was taken from Mexico. Cesar said, we're going to get it back block by block. We're going to buy it back. Remember that we have the power. I like to end a lot of my lectures when I talk. Who's got the power? We've got the power. What kind of power? People power, okay? Don't ever forget that. Everybody that's out there, we have the power, but we've got to use our power. We've got to engage, we've got to participate, and we definitely have to vote, okay? So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much.
All of you. Thank you, Dr.
We have the power, everyone. Everyone that's with us today, we have the power. Thank you so much for changing our practices so that they're more inclusive, that our students feel as though they belong because they do. And if we can bring back our slide deck, I just want to remind everyone, we do have a webinar every first Thursday of the month from 2 to 4. And I want to thank Melanie Cervantes for letting us showcase her art in our promotional materials. Melanie is a transfer student from El Camino College. She transferred to UC Berkeley, where she lives. And she and her partner have Dignidad Rebelde. Please check out her art. It's amazing. She made this piece as she was fighting through cancer. And she could definitely utilize all of our support for her incredible talent here. Next slide, please. And please save the date. We have our next webinar is Dr. Adrian Huerta from USC, and he focuses on supporting our students who are parents and also our Latino, Latina, and Latinx men of color. Also, Paul Hernandez, he is the author of The Pedagogy of Real Talk, Engaging, Teaching, and Connecting with Students at Promise. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. And finally, we want to say thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you to all of our sponsors, the California Community College Chancellor's Office, PCC, Southwestern College, Berkeley City College, Evergreen Valley College, and the Los Angeles Community College District. Please remember, Colegas is an organization affiliated with the National Community College Hispanic Council. We encourage you to join as a member. Please visit us at www.cccolegas.org. Muchas gracias. Thank you, and we'll see you next month. Gracias a todos.